right, welcome to Milonga Mascarita, the podcast. I'm Ray Rudowski, the host and creator, and this is a podcast based in Hong Kong where we look at things that are happening around the world, in the world of tango, the secrets, the backstories, the personalities. And with me today, we've had a very bad year in tango. 2020 was a terrible year. Hopefully 2021 will be a better year. But joining me from Munich, Germany, is my very special guest to talk about tango's 3 best years. Theresa Faus is a DJ, organizer, and amateur historian who has really kind of looked a little bit more at some of the things that drove tango music in its golden era. And I'm very happy to be speaking with you today. Theresa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ray, for inviting me.
All right. We talked about the idea of tango's best years, 3 best years, and you marked them down as 1929, 1938, and 1943. Is there something that we're going to be looking at in our little chat that kind of sums up what those 3 years mean to you and to the world of tango?
Okay, it was difficult to choose the years because we have so many much good music from several years, but I chose the years because they marked an important point in the development of tango as business, as popularity, and also stylistically. 29 was the last year of the big tango boom of the 20s, where a lot of tangos were produced, much more than later, by the way. Many people were dancing. There were many orchestras, and already there were different styles. They had already developed into different directions, and it was the last year of this boom. And the year after came the world economic crisis, and tango went down as a business. And in consequence, many musicians had to stop, and orchestras had to solve. But they still stayed, and many of them came back later. So 38 was a very successful year of the second tango boom, which had started with Juan D'Arienzo in the mid-30s and 36. And with that Juan D'Arienzo, tango became popular again, and more people were dancing, and also the crisis was over, and people could buy discs and visit milongas. And so stylistically, D'Arienzo had a big influence, and this was on a very high point in that year in 38. Many orchestras had followed this style of more to play more rhythmic and more energetic, and so this was a general tendency, more or less followed by all the orchestras that were there.
I think that also in that period, there was also a change once the economy started to improve, that there was this migration from the provinces, and more people coming into Buenos Aires to work meant that there would obviously be more room for diversions, for entertainment. And that played a role also in the fact that these nightclubs, these cabarets, started to take off with live music.
Yes, and that made that more musicians had work, and more orchestras could be creative. And already there was even more than in the 20s a big variety of styles. Extremely different styles were successful.
And how about 1943? So then we see this sort of transition 5 years later to another very interesting period.
Yes, okay, in 38, some say this was the start of the golden age, the so-called golden age, and in the years after then, there was a general trend to a style that is called el cantor de la orquesta, which means the singers became more important. They sang more bigger parts of the lyrics, and they were really the stars on the stage, and the orchestras came up pairs of orchestra and singer, like Troilo Fiorentino, Agostino Vargas. And so this change happened between 38 and 43. And in 43, the music in general slowed down, became a bit more melancholic, meditative. This until 48 or 41 or so, the rhythmic, energetic style was dominant, and then everything slowed down. But it was still a very successful year, and a lot of new compositions and new lyrics came up. So it was really on this, also on the side of writing new tangos. This was a very creative period.
In 1943, we also see, you mentioned new orchestras. This is again this debut of Pugliese, who comes in with Chanel and some other singers, right? And then we also have Campos, Tanturi Campos, so Alberto Castillo leaves, and then there's this period again where it explodes with this very unique style of Campos, this kind of crooner persona.
Yeah, Pugliese had been successful for years on the stage, but he only had the possibility to record in 43, from 43. Yes, and so it's a very important year because the last of the big four entered the disc business.
That's right. One other thing, we're gonna take a sort of trip through all those years with some clips that you've lined up to give people a sample of the sound and the change in sound. But before we get into it, I have to say that I was just doing some additional research, and in 1913, the Pope Pius X bans tango as this sort of degenerate dance. And then in the United States, foxtrot, I think, joins that kind of group of banned dances. And so I was reading I was trying to find the reference that somehow in 1928 or 29, the other Pope Pius XI, somehow reversed that. I couldn't quite find the reference for it. But do you think that somehow, again, that they were changing mores in society that suddenly kind of lent themselves to promoting tango in a very big way? So it goes from this forbidden dance in like 1913 and the 20s to something that has a little bit more social acceptability.
Maybe it was forbidden or it was banned by the church, but this didn't stop the success of tango even in the years of the 10 years of the 20th century. I don't know exactly about this second Pope. Our actual Pope is he is a big fan of tango and he promotes tango. Well, I don't know what happened in between.
All right, well, let's take a look at, now you mentioned, I'm gonna put up the screen share here and look at this. Here we have the first song, Coquetta, which is seductress or flirt. What is it about this before, like, set up the clip for us. What is it about this song that for you sums up the period? This is Orchestra Tipica Victor Coquetta.
For me, it's one of the most, one of the most beautiful songs, and it's from the standpoint of the point of view of a DJ, it's a magic song, because if you start a tanda with Coquetta, then a special atmosphere is created. And I chose this song because we have the violin of Elvino Vardaro, who had a big influence, and he played in many orchestras, not only in the Orchestra Tipica Victor. He something like this, the violin sound of the late 20s. For this sound, he is very important. And we have in this song, we have throughout the song the violin of, it's a brilliant violin of Elvino Vardaro.
All right.
And
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, continue.
Yeah, and on the other hand, is something like relaxed and meditative at the same time. It's a relaxed atmosphere that is created by Coquetta.
All right, Coquetta, 1929, Orchestra Tipica Victor, a sample of the best year of tango, according to Theresa Faus. I'll pause it there. Again, what we're looking at with this particular piece of music is a very distinct sound, which kind of is the Guardia Vieja, the old guard sound. How is that? How is that characterized?
I wouldn't call it the old guard sound. There's a bit of confusion in the terms. It's old guard was before. Old guard was a quick rhythm and more like what we call now a tango milonga, and this was is much more slow and marcato a quattro, so with 4 beats in the bar and not with 2 beats like before. So some like it call it canjengue, some call it guardia vieja. For me, it's yeah. Some call it Guardia Nueva, but it's not important, these terms. It's just a style that came up in the late 20s, a bit slower, and with very good musicians. So the old guard played often improvised and not so perfect, but these musicians are really perfect in the orchestra tipica Victor.
I think Coquetta is absolutely beautiful song, and it's just like a great dance song, a great song to listen to. Those violins when they come in make you want to weep. What about Penalobien? This is the 1929 version. Is this the same song that was done and popularized by D'Arienzo in the later years?
No, it's another composition. We have, I think there are 3 songs named Penalobien, 3 different songs. I chose this song because it's first, Firpo is an underestimated orchestra, an underrated orchestra. It's he had it's one of the old guys, but he had developed his style, and he didn't stay with the old style. And in this particular song, I listened to it recently once more. It starts very simple. It starts with in unison, and then after half a minute or so, new voices come in, and then the voices spread up, and we have from minute 1 or so, we have new instruments coming in also. We have a clarinet, and then the singer comes, and beneath the singer we have a cello, and then the clarinet comes again later. So this is really not only one voice and maybe a contracanto sometimes. It's in the last part of the song we have really playing together several voices. So if you want to play a bit out of it, just I think you already played.
I queued it up to about the middle, just before the vocal comes in. Shall we give it a shot?
It's a good moment when the vocal comes in. Yes.
Yeah. This is.
We have the clarinet already.
Patrona de un bulín, instalado a todo lujo y sin amor, si pagas tu barraquín y esclava sus alfines de tu inconsciente error. Ten clase y por la huella del deber, seguí viaje, no vendas tu corazón, para eso eres mujer, solo hay un cariño.
Now it's
I'll pause it there. What do we? I mean, what's happening there that you want to highlight for this as?
Yeah, we have the main melody of the part. It's I think it was the A part was played by the violins or maybe by the two, and then a bandoneon in the middle between the bass group and the main melody. We had a third melody, which was played by the bandoneon, and the same happened before the singing with the clarinet. So, and this is a bigger richness that came up in the 20s. Not every orchestra had this. Sometimes they have just some dialogues, or from time to time a contracanto, and a second voice or so. But this is really more complex and with more melodic lines at the same time.
I think
Cruzeiro was great in this.
I think what's important to remember in that piece is the way that it was, the recording techniques at the time, it was all done live to tape, where everybody was playing at the same time. So they didn't have a situation where they could overdub the singer or overdub the other instruments. What you're hearing from 1929 is this unique musicianship that I think is remarkable.
Yeah. And I think they played like this in just one take, much more than the next decades also. They didn't cut or so. They had rehearsed. I suppose they rehearsed very well, but there was a little bit of improvisation or unpredictability in the recording.
Now,
sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes there are two takes of the same song, and they can be quite different.
I wanted to share this song with you, even though it's 1930, so it's a little bit around that same time period, but it's one of my favorite valses by Juan Maglio. And whenever I play this in a tanda, there is a sort of, it has a very mesmerizing effect. So let's play it and let's talk a little bit about this evolution of music towards the 1938 period.
Wonderful.
I'll pause it there. So
great.
It's an absolutely stunning piece of music that I think, you know, it does sound timeless. So you look at these sorts of pieces of music, you talk about sort of the golden era, the better sound recordings, but to find pieces of music that have that same sound quality that are, what is that, 90 years old, we're talking 91 years old, is just to be able to dance to that, I think in some ways gives you a real connection with the past.
Yes, technically it's not much worse than music 10 years later or so. And there's also a big richness in this piece. The piano was very active. The piano didn't only make the bass accompaniment, also it had own melodies, and we had the strings in the middle once more, and mainly the bandoneons in the main melody. And Juan Maglio was one of the oldest guys in tango, but he had a quite modern orchestra for that time. Even Troilo played for some time in Juan Maglio's orchestra. He had very good musicians, and the orchestra is also, it's bigger than a sextetto. It was, I would say, 4 violins or so. And if I compare this waltz with waltzes of D'Arienzo from 8 years later or so, I would say stylistically there's no difference. The D'Arienzo plays a bit quicker, but the richness of the instruments and the melodies and how they interweave, it's the same more or less.
There is a period in sort of that interim of like 1934 to 1939 where some of those songs are recorded by different orchestras the same song. So you've got the ones that come to mind. Nada Más is recorded by several different key players. Canaro does a version of it. Then you've got the D'Arienzo version. So it looks like they're all sort of playing with themes. Some of these early, the ones from the 1928-29 period are redone, maybe with a little bit more of a let's call it a modern touch. So the 1938 touch. But you see a lot of that in the valses, especially in the instrumentals, the early instrumentals of D'Arienzo, where he's taking those types of pieces of music, gritos de alma, and bringing them up to a more contemporary standard of the day.
D'Arienzo's success was, in the beginning at least, was to take very old pieces, Gallo Ciego, Derecho Viejo, and to give them his style. And so it was, and these pieces, I think it was, people knew the music, and then they discovered how D'Arienzo played it, and this was a part of his popularity, of his idea of success. Later, he had an own repertoire, more and more.
Let me ask you, before we go into 1938, what do you think the value of understanding some of these histories is to a dancer or to an organizer?
I think for a DJ, it's essential to know the time periods and to be able to connect tangos in a tanda of the same style, and he can find ideas for tandas when he knows from which year is a song. But for a normal tango person, for a dancer, it's on the one hand it's not important, but to listen more and more, and this is my own experience, leads you to understand and to compare between orchestras, to compare an orchestra from during the time, and so you get into the history without wanting it, or without planning it. And it's not about to have in mind then all these historical facts, but to have all this development ready in your musical memory. As a dancer also.
There is an element of tango that I kind of look at in terms of the society for creative anachronism, that those people that dress up in Napoleonic costumes and sort of go out and fight these mock battles. In some ways, there is an element of that to tango where you're going back in time to 90 years ago or 80 years ago, or, these time periods I think are quite special. And there is a certain aspect of this that is a respect for that I think is quite important if you're going to be serious about tango.
You mean us now going 90 years back, or?
Yeah.
Within the tango also we have references to the past, but yes, for me it's still these old orchestras, or these golden age orchestras, are still the best music. We have now some contemporary orchestras which are also really good, but those who are really good, they learned a lot of these old orchestras. Not some only copy them, some develop an own style, but this is still our best repertoire that we have.
Absolutely.
And I'm very happy that now good transfers are coming of this old music.
Let's take a look at the next period, which is the period that comes in 1938. Now, I'm going to play two versions of this. Why did you pick La Bruja? What is it about this piece of music that sums up the transition, or 1938, as one of the best tango years for you?
It's also the result of the transition. In the transition of 36, D'Arienzo was not so, had a bit lower energy still, but La Bruja is highest energy. It's for dancers, it's irresistible to dance. And we have also the voice of Alberto Echagüe, which is a strong voice, a male aggressive voice. Sometimes it's too much, especially in later years. And also the lyrics, it's not nice lyrics. It's lyrics that is a bit, it's complaining about a woman who had left the man, and then now he's aggressing her with La Bruja, means the witch. and he's
Well, here's the translation. It
very
says,
angry. It's a very angry lyric.
the witch who was
women.
who yesterday was
Here
queen
you have
of
the-
my whole being, now that the spell is broken, is nothing more than a woman. I commit myself to a simple moral
this is a
life.
bit typical for the early in early tango. Tango is very often about lost love, but the kind to speak about lost love in early years was more aggressive against the woman as the one who had destroyed everything. Not always, but this is one typical kind of lyrics that appear later. They are it's more melancholic in general, and not so much who is the guilty one. But I chose it because of these lyrics, because it's so typical.
Okay, well, let's give it a listen.
Ese grito que sube del pecho y llega a los labios cargado de rencor. Yo vuelvo a tu lado, atadas las manos, pero para decirte que todo acabó, que ya no me importa tu risa, tu llanto, que a fuerza y coraje vencí el corazón, y que hoy como nunca, mirándote cerca, te veo realmente así como soy. La bruja que ayer fuera reina de todo mi ser, hoy roto el encanto, no es más que mujer.
I'll pause it there, and then it does have this very unique quality to it. But let's just in terms of comparing it to what happened afterwards. Darienzo recorded 2 versions of this. I'm only going to play a little bit of this, and let's talk about it in terms of why this sums up 1938 as a special year for you. This is the version with Mario Bustos in 1959. Completely different. I mean, it's obviously it's the same song, but not to put aside the stereo recording techniques, there's something very different about it. How do you feel about this?
I feel this late Darienzo so heavy. So it's slower, but it's also heavier in the way they play. For me, the 30s Darienzo are fresh, rhythmic, and make a good mood, even if the lyrics are so so awful. But this late is heavy. And it's even the second song for me personally, it can be too much. 2 songs in a row of this kind. Ooh. And the voice of Mario Bustos, okay, it's not so fresh as the voice of Alberto Echagüe. Yeah, heavy. This is the word for me.
You also picked Dindon, which is one of my favorites. And I play this intermittently because I think that it's just a beautiful song. It's got a very jazzy feel to it. This is Dindon, which is recorded by the Lucio De Mare orchestra. Tell me about this.
Lucio De Mare had a background as a jazz musician. So he's the pianist of the orchestra, and we hear in his piano, we hear something like elastic, tiny pauses or tiny stretching of the notes, what we call rubato, but it's so It's in a way that it feels elastic and swingy. This is what De Mare's piano is. And what I also like of piano is he has very good instrumentalists. For example, his first violin was Raoul Kaplun, one of the best violins in tango. And we can very clearly hear the groups of instruments, piano, bandoneons, and violins, and they are in a steady dialogue. And then when the singer comes in, what De Mare has in a beautiful way is counter melody against the singer, mostly of the violins, and this is really what we can call counterpoint. Means two violins interweaving independent. They are melodies, but they interweave in a way that it's harmonic all the time. And this has De Mare even in this 38 recording, because most of his repertoire is from the 40s. May I just make a remark? I don't want to forget it. There are 4 orchestras who already started in the 30s and who became very successful in the 40s, but they had a pause. They couldn't record around 1940 because of the business policy of the record companies. These 4 orchestras were Troilo, Chanturi, De Mare, and Lawrence. They left us beautiful recordings, 37, 38, and then the next recordings we have is from 40, 41, 42 only. And this is a shame, because the record company Odeon made test records and they didn't publish them, or they didn't continue to record with these orchestras, which are among the best orchestras. And so we have from De Mare, we have only 4 songs in 38, and then the next record sessions was only in 42, I think.
Right.
This is one of the 4 songs we have from 38.
Now, the one other remark is that this starts out in a very haunting minor key, and then it changes to a major key.
These changes are normal in tango, but this minor key, I wonder if it's some what we call a church key. It's a special minor key. It's like it has an oriental touch, although musicians don't want this word oriental because it's too dizzy. It's not very clear. But I think you know what I mean. It's like almost pentatonic.
Let's have a listen.
De mi corazón hacen Dindon furtivamente. Comprenderán que es un tañir de amores ese Dindon tan elocuente. Esa voz es como un canto, es que estoy queriendo tanto. Será verdad o es imaginación el placer de escuchar tan feliz canción.
I think Miranda is a hugely underrated singer. That's just absolutely irresistible to dance to, but it's also just haunting to listen to.
He's not underrated. He just had recorded only, I think, 8 or 9 songs. It's unfortunately we don't hear much more of him. Then later, Beron came to De Mare and he recorded a lot of songs. But I prefer Miranda. He's his best singer, I think.
From 1938 onwards, we see, at least in Buenos Aires popular culture, this explosion of cabarets and orchestras. We see a lot of singers coming in. You mentioned that this 1938 period is a period when the singer moves from the background to the foreground, so that the singer becomes the star. I'm going to show a part of this documentary that kind of sums up a little bit of the time period. And the documentary is from a place that I think it's called Everyone at Marabu. And Marabu was a cabaret club that summed up where Troilo Fiorentino and his orchestra started. A lot of other orchestras of the time were there, but the Troilo Orchestra was the house band at Marabu in that early period of its existence. And there's a very interesting documentary that talks a little bit about that time period. And then let's move into a little bit of what's happening. And then we'll play the song that you picked that sums up 1943. So this is, again, a summary. There's a nice translation here as well, so you can read the subtitles. But this is Todo el mundo al Marabu, everyone from Marabu, which is the Cabaret Club.
Del acervo del tango para los músicos también, y un medio de vida.
Y hay que ver los papelones que hace ver a su pebeta.
Rufino era un mocosito cuando cantaba con Di Sarli. Él cantaba una milonga cuando un viejo se enamora. Cuando un viejo se enamora anda todo alborotado. Había un señor mayor con una chica y se la empezó a cantar a él con disimulo al estilo de Castillo.
Cuando un viejo se enamora, anda todo alborotado.
Se la puso a cantar, el viejo casi lo mata, le quería pegar.
Porque se siente engripado. Y si baila alguna conga, un postrón, una milonga, queda todo desarmado.
That, I think, starts to kind of look at some of the wackiness of the way in which milongas, well, I shouldn't call them milongas, the party, the nightlife that just started to explode over that period of 1938 up until the sort of late 40s, and then it sort of died out. And this is another one from a documentary that I found on Troilo that looks, in Troilo's own words, at the singer Fiorentino and describes him. And then let's talk about Fiorentino and your pick for 1943.
Iba a tener el gordo, ¿no?
Fiorentino no solo estuvo identificado con el aplauso de su público, sino también con el tango en su más pura esencia. Su ductilidad le permitía compenetrarse del espíritu mismo de cada canción.
Yo no soy músico, pero la orquesta yo creo que fue mejorando, en el sentido de ser una orquesta muy bailable y rítmica como la del 40, en la que estaba Goñi, y mismo los tangos que tiene cantado Fiorentino. Al venir Marino y después más con la aparición de Florial Ruiz, la orquesta se fue haciendo, no sé si más lenta, pero menos acompasada, más melódica, la orquesta.
Let's stop it there. It's interesting because these documentaries, I think, most of them are in Spanish. It's interesting to find some that have subtitles for those who don't speak Spanish, but and I'll leave links for everyone who's interested. But let's talk a little bit about that transition to 43. What's happening there, and how does set up this next clip for us?
For example, Troilo's orchestra, he followed in not literally. He followed D'Arienzo in tempo and rhythmical energy until 41, and in 42 he slowed down. So it was also part of the trend. But it's very special in Troilo's orchestra is that it's the best musicians ever. He started with he started in Marabu his career on stage with Orlando Goñi at the piano, and one of his bandoneonists was the young Astor Piazzolla, who was very eager to play in Troilo. He didn't start in 37, a little bit later. He was very young and he was very eager to play in Troilo's orchestra, and then he insisted, and finally he could play the bandoneon there. So he had wonderful musicians. They were very creative, Orlando Goni didn't always improvised all the time, and he inspired the Troilo style a lot. And then, okay, we don't have recordings from between 38 and 41, which is really a shame, because they were playing all the time in Marabu in these years, and they're very successful. And then in the first recordings of 41, we have the singer Francisco Fiorentino, which is he was older than the other musicians, because all these guys were very young. All these guys we hear today, Troilo started with 23 years, his own orchestra. And Fiorentino also had already begun in the 20s as a bandoneonist. And then he, from time to time, he played, for example, in the old orchestra of Juan D'Arienzo in the 20s, and also in Pedro Mafia's orchestra. And then he started to sing first occasionally, and then he became a singer. But it's incredible when you hear a song sung by Fiorentino from 30 maybe, and then compare it to the Troilo period, because he had developed incredibly as a singer. He had started to have a beautiful phrasing. Phrasing means to sing like one would speak, and not only sing note by note, but to stretch some notes and to hurry up according to what's the words he's singing. And so he had a beautiful phrasing and a beautiful management of the voice in terms of loud and quiet and loud, and timbre of his voice. And it said, I recently read it, that Troilo had taught his singers to sing this romantic way and this very complex and differentiated way of expression.
Let's play. Why did you pick this song? Because there's two versions of it at the same time period, one with Alberto Podesta and one Anibal Troilo with Francisco Fiorentino. Why did you, we could play them both, but I'm more interested in understanding, how did you decide that this was going to be the signature song?
We have Troilo works a lot with contrasts, and his instruments have different timbres, and they change it from phrase to phrase normally. So in this song, it's in all the songs of Troilo more or less, but I find it especially clear. And when I teach musicality classes, then I often choose this song because this is so clear in this one. We have in the beginning, the violins are sharp and a bit aggressive, and also the bandoneon, and then comes the part, the B part, where it's all romantic and gentle and a bit eerie. And then yeah, this changes from part to part, or sometimes also within a part. They are so characteristic for Troilo. And I also chose it because it's the typical lyrics also. The lyrics is a sadness after having ended a love that ended, and it's compared. The sadness it's related to the weather. The weather is mentioned because Garua means a soft rain, and so like the rain outside, like this, it's in his heart. This is a way of poetics that we have often in tango by Cadícamo. Yes, and the last point why this is so special, so typical for Troilo, is after the singing comes Troilo with his solo bandoneon. And the solo bandoneon is like a continuation of the singing, and this weeping atmosphere is in his bandoneon. And his solo is very simple. It's not brilliant or technically outstanding. It's just few notes and just melancholic and expressive. And when you play now the song, you should play it completely, or you play at least the part with the bandoneon solo.
Okay, well, let's. I'll pick it up at different points.
This is the sharp part. And now soft, then
Llena de hastío y de frío, el viento trae un extraño
violin.
lamento, parece un pozo de sombras la noche, y yo en las sombras camino muy lento, mientras tanto la grúa se acentúa con sus púas en mi corazón. En esta noche tan fría y tan mía, pensando siempre en lo mismo, mi amigo.
I'll pause it there.
Incredible, this the voice, how he changes the timbre of his voice according to the lyrics. It's really incredible.
What about comparing it, for example, to Podesta and the Pedro Lawrence version? I'll just play a little bit of that, not to play the entire thing, but just for comparative purposes.
Okay, I would say before, or to show the first listen.
How do you, I mean, you clearly have a preference, but just walk us through the what are we listening for? What are we hearing here in terms of comparative musicality?
I would say when I listen to music from this period with the singer and poetry in the foreground, I listen to the expressiveness. Like I listen to how the orchestra reflects the mood of the song, and this is in Lawrence is technically perfect, but it doesn't have these contrasts. It's just not boring. It's not boring at all, but it's more flat in terms of variability of the way of playing of the different moods of the orchestra. Yes.
From a dancer's,
I think it's the same thing.
I was going to say, from a dancer's perspective, is there any way to listen to the music of these different time periods that we've looked at and interpret the dance in a specific way? I mean, is there anything that you can suggest listeners who may not have a background in all of these orchestras or understand the time periods? Is there anything that you think they should be listening for when a particular piece of music comes up at a milonga or when they're practicing?
Okay, they should listen for the mood, even if they don't understand Spanish, but it's sometimes the mood sounds different as the lyrics actually are. But yes, I would listen for the mood and for the changes within the song, because you don't dance. It's better not to dance flat all the time, but to change energy and change also the elements you are dancing according to the music. And when the music slows down and it's gently, I would dance something slow and something stretched. And if it's energetic, like in the beginning of Garua, I would dance in a rhythmical way. And I also would prefer, many dancers don't do this, prefer that dancers do less but listen more. For example, listen to the singer and do something slow, something not complicated, not challenging, but from the repertoire that one can dance without being challenged, and dancing this in an expressive way, which means to adapt the way of steps, the timing of the steps, and also the way the steps are taken with what we are hearing.
Do you think that in any way the music reflects the times, or that the times reflect the music? We talked about the fact that 1929 was the end of this sort of the roaring 20s. You've got this idea again in 1938 of some sort of a comeback. 1943 is the middle of the Second World War, and Argentina in many ways is isolated from the rest of the world. Its musicians are not traveling, at least not traveling to Europe. They're going to South America, maybe somewhere else. How do you see that relationship?
There's people are discussing about, especially about this change in the early 40s to more melancholic music, and some say that even if when Argentina was isolated, luckily in these times, and not participating in the war, and was in a prosperity and an economic prosperity where all this wonderful music could develop, the general mood in the society was more going to sad mood, because they had relations to Europe. That many had families in Europe, or were descendants of European immigrants, and this is one possibility. But it could also be just that because the lyrics became more and more important, and lyricists were very successful, that they were developing within their tango, within the poetic way of making tango. They were developing themselves, even if without an influence from an external influence. I don't know. I cannot answer this question straightly.
One of the things that I like in listening to tango music from those three periods that you've mentioned is references to pop culture. I mean, they refer to vitrola, which is the music machine. They talk about, there's a lot of references to Carlos Gardel in specific songs, this homage to him. There's songs about tango, which I always really kind of think, these self-referential ideas within the music really appeal to me, because it gives me a sense of going back to what it must have been like living in those time periods and experiencing that technology, or that pop reference, or that cultural reference.
Yeah, tango was it was unique because it was mainly in Argentina and Uruguay, and I think it was also a world, something like a closed world, and everybody knew each other, and they were even at that time, and it's still today, they were how do you say it, cultivating the remember what they cultivating the recuerdos and their culture, and so it was, everybody understood these relationships that they made in their songs. I cannot express it better.
We've talked about three of your favorite years. Just to wrap up what we've talked about today, it's been an amazing conversation, and I think you're a wealth of great stories and information on music and history. But to sum it up, we've had 2020, I think, was like a terrible year. But if you look at the sort of modern tango era, you've had these periods of instability within Argentina. I was there a number of years ago when the currency collapsed, and people were texting me saying it must be terrible, and I was like, I didn't notice. I don't even think anybody there realized what was going on, except like everything on the menu was written in pencil, and they just kept changing it from day to day. But this idea that somehow there's a survival or a sustainability of tango, let me ask you, what do you think it will take to sustain tango through this period that we have of a worldwide pandemic?
I think it's sustaining. For example, your Milonga Mascarita is now a podcast. I'm also a Milonga organizer, and I've started to write comparisons of versions, for example, and I also gave some online seminars and podcasts. And so the aficionados del tango, the people who really are in the tango, DJs and passionate dancers, and so they follow they stay with the tango, they study listen to new music, edit music, and okay, I have no idea what dancers are doing without. Sometimes I see on Facebook what they are writing, but okay, there are secret milongas. This is another thing, and I suppose in Hong Kong they are already dancing.
No, we're not. No, we're not dancing. Everything has been closed down here since November, the end of November. And what had happened was
Same
that
here, yes.
well, it was a very interesting
There was a little bit
situation.
in summer, but not so much. Let's say the people that I know for closer in the tango world, they are all staying with tango.
Yeah.
So maybe those who I don't know that much, maybe I don't know what they are doing, but I'm convinced that even if it's 1 year more of pandemic, it will come back. There will be changes in the, of course, in the business, because many have lost studios, for example, or venues.
Yeah.
We have to find a new way as organizers. Maybe there will be less organizers. They will organize in another way. But I'm 100% sure that it's coming back.
Well,
and it happened. A lot of good things happened also in this year. For example, the new editions of Tango Tunes and Tango Time Travel. And my music library is better than ever. with better quality. I'm very eager to DJ again.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of time to study these musical things.
Just to wrap up, Theresa, you also give musical seminars, so people, if they're interested, can get in touch with you on Facebook, and I'll leave a link as well. And thank you so much for spending the time and going through the 3 greatest years in your estimation, and going into the kind of detail that I guess we just never really get a chance to get into with somebody who has as much knowledge as you have to share with us. So Theresa Faus from Munich, thank you so much. And I hope that we will meet in person and be able to talk more or dance. And it has been a wonderful, and I hope that we can do this again soon. Thanks again.
It was a pleasure, Ray. It was a real pleasure to be invited and to share my thoughts about music. Thank you very much.
Good luck.